So we receive now the block bytes with the registration of the intermaxillary relationships. They were made to sit in a very solid relationship with those bars fixed with wax. Then the dentist marked the midline, as you can see, and I continued it on my models, on the base of the models, to make clear which is the midline. So those two models are fixed with metal bars. You can use wood sticks, toothpicks, for example, or matches. Now I check the position. I have the midline also on the upper part of the articulator. Here I decided the position, the relative position of the two arms, and it is fixed with a screw, and I prepared the models to have the two bases parallel, one to the other, and with the table I did retentions with a burr on the base of the models to increase the mechanical connection between the plaster of the model and the plaster that I use now to fix the models in the articulator. So the technician is ready to prepare the plaster. You saw, so now you'll see that first we place some water, and then we add easily, slowly, we add the plaster powder. I want to get a consistency which is medium, so to say, medium consistency. Not like a putty, but not to flow like yogurt. No, that's not good. That's too fluid. So adding a little bit of water, maybe a little bit of powder, the technician decides the consistency. A little bit more water. You see the wire behind the models? This is to tell the technician how far from the axis of the articulator he has to place the lower model. Actually, the two models together. So the models were saturated in water for 2 or 3 minutes, because otherwise the dry plaster of the models could not unite enough with the plaster that the technician is using now to fix the models in the articulator. So that's the best consistency, as you can see. Always we start with a lower when you do it in such an articulator, right? When you use facebow articulators, it's the opposite, the upper. But this type of articulators, you start with the lower. Okay, so a little bit of plaster on the table, then you place the articulator on, and you cover everything and even more plaster. Right, and now we're ready to bring the models together. And that's the problem. At what distance from the hinge, from the axis of the articulator, from the hinge, at what distance do you place it? And you see that wire there tells the technician where he should place the model. Otherwise, one would have gone way back, right? But no, the point is that there is a certain distance from the hinge to the incisal, to the two lower central incisors. So now he's doing the second fixing in the same time, fixing the upper in the same time. It's a little bit dangerous because the plaster might modify its position, you know, upon contraction, dilation, contraction. But if you keep it in good contact, well, that is not the best thing, but you can do it. So now the technician is building something like a hemisphere, not too big. It should be symmetric. something that will not impede or hinder the technician in what he's going to do next. I mean the production of the denture. Using a knife, special knife for the plaster, he takes the excess away, the excess material away, checks the models to be parallel with the plan of the table, obviously because before he prepared the models so that their upper part is parallel, of the base of the models was parallel with the horizontal plan. The midline of the models should be superposable to the midline of the articulator, because if you don't do all these things, then you will have trouble orienting yourself when you work, when you do the denture. So that's the lower model. You don't need a lot of plaster, but you need some plaster also around the base of the lower model. And again, you see that wire. This gives you the distance from the hinge to the margin of the lower central incisors, the interincisal lower point. So the hinge axis is where the upper arm lifts up. You see that bar-like, rounded bar-like shape in front of the screw. So the plaster is now made nice. We don't want to have cutting zones or rough zones. We want to work nicely in a nice environment. I don't use a lot of material because that would create extra weight on my model, and of course my hands will get tired when operating it. So the middle of the hemisphere corresponds to the middle of the articulator. So everything has to be horizontal and symmetric, so to say, right? You don't even realize how bad it is and how many problems you have when something is shifted. So after the initial setting of the plaster, we can operate better and to clean the excess and all the residues to be taken out from the articulator. Is not what he is doing now, but what he is going to do just in a minute. But now he has to clean the bowl in order to avoid plaster to harden. It would be much more difficult to remove later. Now there's the time to do that until there's the initial setting of the plaster of the model, or that fixes the model in the articulator, the articulating plaster. I also cleaned the knife, plaster knife, that's what it's called. So all the instruments that I used, I kept them clean. The plaster is still a little bit soft, so the technician is checking, cleaning a little bit. It's hard to stay and do nothing in such cases. So you always tend to do something, but the plaster, you have to wait for it.